Imagine this: a silent, dark expanse of space, where the only light comes from distant stars and dying embers of forgotten battles. In the vast emptiness, an alien fleet drifts forward, its commanders confident in their supremacy. Their species has conquered countless civilizations, their warships cutting through enemy defenses like a blade through soft flesh. They have never known fear, until now. Because today, they are about to encounter something they cannot comprehend. A human battleship. The galaxy is no stranger to war. Empires rise and fall, fleets clash and burn, and species fight for dominance. The Zelthar Dominion, a ruthless, warlike empire, had always been at the top of this brutal hierarchy. For centuries, they expanded their influence, crushing any resistance, enslaving entire planets, and harvesting the resources of conquered worlds. Their technology was advanced beyond measure, their warships designed for total destruction. No species had ever stood against them and survived. That was the unshakable truth. Until they came across humanity. The Zelthar had heard rumors, of course, whispers of a new species in the Orion arm of the Milky Way. A species that had spread across multiple star systems in an impossibly short time. A species that defied all conventional logic with its rapid technological advancement and unrelenting aggression when provoked. At first, the Dominion dismissed these reports. Humans were just another primitive race, they thought. Another civilization to be conquered. And so, they sent a fleet. Not a massive invasion force, not a show of power, but a mere reconnaissance squadron. 20 warships, lightly armed, meant only to scout and analyze. The plan was simple: enter human territory, test their defenses, and report back. If humans resisted, they would be eliminated. What the Zelthar did not anticipate was that their fleet would never return. When the Dominion's ships crossed into human space, they expected to find weak defenses, perhaps a few outposts or patrol ships. Instead, they found something else entirely. A single ship, motionless, waiting. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The hull was dark, angular, covered in strange armor that seemed to drink in the surrounding light. It bore no traditional weapon placements, no visible thrusters, nothing that matched any known design. And yet there was an unmistakable presence about it. Something unnatural, something deeply unsettling. The Zelthar admiral scoffed. A single ship? Was this humanity's defense? Surely this was a derelict, a mere husk floating in the void. He ordered his fleet forward, weapons primed, intending to board and analyze. But then, something happened. Something that sent a ripple of unease through every Zelthar on board. The human warship moved, not in a way that made sense. Not with the slow, predictable momentum of conventional thrusters. No. It shifted. Instantaneous, precise, as if space itself had bent to its will. In one moment, it was there. In the next, it was somewhere else, positioned behind the Zelthar fleet. Alarm signals blared across every alien vessel. The Dominion had mastered faster-than-light travel, but this was something different. There was no buildup, no energy signature, no transition. 1 second of stillness, and then movement beyond comprehension. And then came the transmission. A voice, deep and cold, cut through the Zelthar's encrypted channels, speaking, in perfect calculated precision. You have trespassed into human territory. Leave now, or be erased. The Zelthar admiral snarled at the challenge. No species had ever dared to speak to them this way. With a single command, he ordered his fleet to fire. Plasma lances, ion torpedoes, kinetic rail slugs, every weapon, at their disposal, unleashed upon the lone human vessel. A blinding storm of destruction. And yet, not a single shot connected. The ship was gone. No explosion. No debris. Just empty space where it had once been. Before the admiral could even comprehend what had happened, the human ship reappeared directly above them, and then it opened fire. The Zelthar had fought countless battles. They had crushed fleets, burned worlds, and shattered civilizations. But never, never had they seen a warship behave like this. The human vessel didn't fire traditional energy blasts or projectile weapons. No visible launch bays, no railguns, no torpedo tubes. And yet, in an instant, the Zelthar fleet was being torn apart. It began with their shields. Dominion warships were protected by powerful energy barriers, capable of withstanding direct hits from dreadnought-class weaponry. But as soon as the human vessel fired, those shields simply ceased to exist. No explosions, no flickering destabilization, just instant failure, as if they had never been there at all. The Zelthar were plunged into a panic. Had their shields failed due to an unknown interference? Had the humans deployed some kind of electromagnetic disruption? Then came the hull breaches. The Zelthar flagship, a massive battlecruiser, was the first to suffer. Across its surface, jagged, unnatural tears appeared in the armor, as if something had phased through the metal itself and sliced it apart. From the inside, crew members screamed as their compartments vented into space, their bodies frozen and shattered by the void. The human vessel remained eerily silent. No energy emissions, no visible weapon turrets, no explanation for the devastation it was causing. It was as if the ship itself was rewriting the rules of combat. The Dominion had never encountered technology that defied the laws of physics in this way. The Zelthar admiral barked frantic orders, demanding immediate countermeasures. His officers scrambled, switching to alternative targeting systems, adjusting their weapons to new frequencies. And then, the human battleship spoke again. "You were warned." Without warning, a single thin beam of crimson light lashed out from the human vessel. It was no conventional laser, no simple energy weapon. It did not burn through hull plating or cause massive explosions. Instead, wherever the beam touched, the Zelthar ship simply ceased to exist. Matter dissolved into nothingness, erased from reality itself. A single stroke, and an entire Dominion warship was reduced to a void of scattered atoms. Panic overtook the fleet. This was not war. This was annihilation. The Zelthar had always been the predators, the conquerors. But now, for the first time in their history, they were prey. The admiral, his voice shaking, ordered a full retreat. It was the only logical choice. They had to escape, return to Dominion space, warn the High Command, but the human ship had other plans. As the Zelthar vessels attempted to break formation, they found themselves trapped. Their engines roared, their warp drives screamed, but they were unable to move. It was as if space itself had congealed around them, holding them in place like insects caught in amber. The Zelthar admiral's mind raced. Was this some form of gravity well? A containment field? No. It was worse. One by one, their ships began to collapse inward. Not from an explosion, not from external firepower, but from something far more horrifying. The very fabric of their hulls seemed to fold into themselves, compacting into impossibly small points of darkness before vanishing entirely. It was a fate far worse than mere destruction. It was erasure, complete and total. The few ships that had yet to be destroyed desperately attempted to communicate. Their comms channels were flooded with distress calls, frantic attempts at diplomacy, surrender, anything to end the nightmare. But the human battleship did not respond. It did not gloat. It did not make demands. It simply watched. One last ship remained, the Admiral's own battlecruiser. As his bridge crew fell into chaos, around him the Zelthar Admiral sat frozen, staring at the silent Leviathan before him. It was no mere warship. It was something else entirely. Something beyond comprehension. And then, it vanished. No explosion, no trace, no lingering energy signature. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone. The Zelthar were left drifting, in the wreckage of their once mighty fleet. The Admiral, shaking, sent a final message to the Dominion High Command. His voice was hoarse, filled with an emotion no Zelthar had ever known. They are not like us. Not warriors, not conquerors. We have seen the abyss, my lords, and it is human. As his ship limped away, escaping into the void, one final thought haunted his mind. If this was just one human battleship, what horrors awaited in the depths of their empire? The battle was over, but the echoes of terror remained. The Zelthar Dominion had never known defeat, until now. The handful of survivors who managed to escape carried with them a horrifying truth. Humanity was not just another species to be conquered. They were something far worse. Something unknowable. Something that could erase an entire fleet as effortlessly as one might snuff out a candle. The Zelthar admiral, still shaken, sat motionless in the command seat of his crippled battlecruiser as it limped through space. His crew, those who remained, were silent. There were no triumphant speeches, no vows of vengeance. Only a profound, bone-deep fear. No one spoke of what they had seen, but it haunted them all the same. The way the human warship had moved. The way it had rendered their shields useless. The way its weapons had functioned not by overwhelming force, but by sheer impossibility. This was no ordinary enemy. The distress call reached the Dominion High Command within hours. Normally, the leaders of the Dominion would have dismissed the report as the ramblings of a coward, a failure unworthy of the Empire. But as they watched, the recordings, their expressions hardened. They saw the moment their fleet was torn apart. They saw the horrifying precision of the human ship's attacks. They saw the sheer, incomprehensible power wielded by a single vessel. And for the first time in their empire's long history, the High Command hesitated. "This cannot be real," one of the warlords muttered. "And yet it is," another whispered. The council chamber was filled with silence. A decision had to be made. The Dominion had always responded to threats with overwhelming force, crushing their enemies before they could rise against them. But this was different. Even if they deployed their full armada, could they truly win against something that defied the very laws of warfare? The Grand Warlord, supreme ruler of the Dominion, finally spoke. "We cannot allow this anomaly to threaten our rule." His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something even he could not suppress. "Dread. We will send a fleet," he continued. "Not a reconnaissance force, not an expedition. A full war armada, 500 warships. We will bring the wrath of the Dominion upon them before they have a chance to strike again." The other warlords exchanged uneasy glances. 500 warships. Never before had the Dominion committed such a force to a single enemy. Not even when they crushed the mighty Drath Consortium, or burned the Sylvani Imperium to ashes. This was a force meant to annihilate entire civilizations. But deep down, they all felt it, the creeping doubt, the cold whisper of fear. As the order was given, fleets mobilized across Dominion-controlled space. Shipyards churned out reinforcements, supply lines were fortified, and the full might of the Empire was set in motion. The plan was simple. Strike, before the humans could retaliate. Overwhelm them, wipe them from existence before they could pose a real threat. And yet, even as the Armada prepared for war, there was an unspoken question haunting every soldier, every commander, every leader. Would it be enough? The invasion fleet departed, slipping into the darkness of space, their course set for human territory. The journey would take weeks, but for many on board, it felt far too short. Rumors spread through the ranks like wildfire. Those who had reviewed the battle recordings spoke in hushed voices of what they had seen. The impossible movements. The eerie silence of the human vessel. The way it had dismantled an entire fleet without effort. Some laughed off the fear, reassuring themselves that a single ship, no matter how powerful, could not stand against the might of the Dominion's full war armada. Others were not so sure. As the fleet neared the edges of human space, long-range scanners detected something unexpected. A lone human ship. Not a fleet. Not an armada. Just one vessel. It was smaller than the previous warship encountered. Sleek, angular, almost unassuming. But something about it was deeply unsettling. It hung motionless in space, as if waiting, as if watching. The Zelthar fleet wasted no time. The admiral in charge of the invasion, a veteran of countless battles, ordered immediate engagement. "No hesitation," he barked. "Destroy it before it can call for reinforcements." Hundreds of warships opened fire. Plasma beams, missile barrages, kinetic slugs, all unleashed in a devastating storm of destruction. And yet, once again, none of the weapons hit. The human ship moved, not in a conventional way, not with thrusters, not with evasive maneuvers. It simply wasn't there anymore. 1 second, it was in their sights. The next, it had repositioned behind them. Then came the message: leave. Just one word. No threats, no anger. Just a simple command. The Zelthar admiral sneered. They think they can intimidate us? Fire again. But before the order could be carried out, something happened. The Dominion fleet systems flickered. Power readings plummeted. Sensors failed. Ships lost control, drifting helplessly as if the very fabric of space had turned against them. And then, the human vessel acted. It moved through the fleet like a phantom, unseen and untouchable. One by one, Dominion warships began to vanish. Not destroyed, not broken, just gone. No wreckage, no debris. It was as if they had been erased from existence itself. Panic spread like wildfire. Crew members abandoned their posts. Officers shouted conflicting orders. The admiral, once so confident, now stared in horror as his fleet was unmade before his eyes. This was not war. This was something else entirely. As the last few remaining Dominion ships desperately attempted to flee, the human vessel sent one final message. There will be no second warning. And then, just like before, it was gone. The few survivors who managed to escape returned to Dominion space in silence. There were no celebrations, no cries of vengeance, only the cold, undeniable truth. Humanity was not an empire. It was not a nation. It was something else. And the Dominion had just learned what it meant to be afraid. The survivors of the failed invasion returned home, but they were not welcomed as heroes. The Zelthar Dominion had never before suffered such a catastrophe. Never had they encountered an enemy that could not be fought, an opponent that refused to engage in the traditional rituals of war. This was not merely a defeat, it was an unraveling of everything they believed about their own superiority. The Grand Warlord sat upon his throne of black obsidian, listening in silence as the broken remnants of his armada delivered their report. The great warlords of the Dominion stood in uneasy silence, watching as the battle-hardened admiral, the same man who had once led campaigns of annihilation across a dozen star systems, knelt before them, trembling. The report was simple. Their fleet had been wiped from existence, not destroyed, not repelled, erased. The Grand Warlord's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne, his piercing eyes locked onto the broken admiral. "You are certain of this?" His voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried through the chamber like a death knell. "Yes, my lord," the admiral rasped. "They were not destroyed. They were unmade, vanished, as if they had never existed." The warlords shifted uncomfortably. This was not how war was supposed to be. The Dominion did not fear its enemies. It crushed them, conquered them, ground them into dust beneath its heel. But what the humans had done to their fleet was not war. It was something worse. It was a message. The Grand Warlord leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "And what of this human vessel? The one that erased our ships?" The admiral swallowed, hard. It was not a warship in the traditional sense. We scanned it. It was smaller than our cruisers, yet it possessed capabilities beyond our understanding. It moved as if the laws of physics did not apply to it. Its weapons were invisible. We never saw them fire. We never saw any sign of attack. And yet, our ships disappeared, one by one. A heavy silence filled the chamber. The Dominion had encountered powerful enemies before, species with advanced technologies, formidable fleets, and devastating weapons. But those enemies could be fought. They could be studied, adapted to, defeated. The humans were something else entirely. The Grand Warlord turned his gaze toward his most trusted advisor, an ancient strategist known as Zolthar, who had orchestrated some of the Dominion's greatest conquests. "What do you make of this?" Zolthar's voice was slow and measured. "We have miscalculated." A murmur spread through the warlords. The Grand Warlord's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "We believed humanity to be a conventional power. We assumed they fought as we do, as all others do. But they do not. They did not respond with rage, nor did they retaliate with an invasion of their own. They merely removed our fleet and warned us to stay away. Zolthar's claws tapped thoughtfully against the table. This is not the behavior of an empire. This is something far older, far more dangerous. The Grand Warlord's voice was laced with suspicion. And what are you suggesting? Zolthar exhaled slowly. We have always believed ourselves to be the dominant force in this galaxy. But what if we are not? What if humanity is something more? Something ancient, something that has seen empires rise and fall before. And what if they do not conquer? Because they do not need to? A wave of unease passed through the chamber. The Dominion had conquered countless civilizations, wiping out species that stood in their way. But this was different. This was not a war. It was a warning. The Grand Warlord clenched his fists. So what do we do? Cower in fear? Allow these creatures to dictate the limits of our empire? Zolthar's gaze was steady. No, my lord. We must learn. The Warlord scoffed. Learn? From these humans? But the Grand Warlord did not dismiss the idea outright. He understood power, and he understood fear. If humanity possessed technology capable of wiping out entire fleets without a trace, then understanding that power was the only way forward. A plan began to form. If we cannot defeat them, the Grand Warlord said slowly, then we must uncover their secrets. We must know what they are hiding. If they are truly an ancient force, then we must know their history. The warlords murmured amongst themselves, some in agreement, others still uneasy. But the decision was made. The Dominion would not strike again blindly. Instead, they would observe. They would infiltrate. They would find the truth. And if the truth was more terrifying than they could imagine, they would decide whether humanity was a threat to be eliminated, or a force to be feared and obeyed. Far from the Dominion's capital, hidden among the vast expanse of deep space, a new fleet was assembled. Not warships this time, but stealth. Vessels, reconnaissance probes, and spies trained to infiltrate and observe. Their mission was simple: find out what humanity truly was, learn its weaknesses, discover its past, and, if possible, find a way to bring the unstoppable force to its knees. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that humanity was already watching them. The Dominion had always been the hunter, never the hunted. Its fleets moved through the void like apex predators, striking down civilizations before they had a chance to resist. But for the first time in their history, they were not the ones looking down upon their prey. They were the ones being watched. The reconnaissance mission was carefully planned. The Dominion had chosen its most elite operatives, spies who had infiltrated enemy governments, assassins who could move unseen through the densest of cities, and data analysts capable of breaking through the most advanced security networks. Their objective was simple: uncover the truth behind humanity's power. If humanity had risen from nothing to become a technological juggernaut, the Dominion needed to know how. If they had simply discovered some ancient relic that granted them their impossible abilities, the Dominion would seize it. If they had allied with some greater force, the Dominion would prepare for war. And if, by some impossible chance, humanity had truly developed these capabilities on their own, then the Dominion had made the greatest mistake in its history by provoking them. The stealth fleet approached human space cautiously, its ships coated in experimental cloaking fields that bent light and radiation away from their hulls. Their technology was the finest the Dominion had ever developed. No civilization had ever detected these vessels before. And yet, the moment they entered the Sol system, they knew something was wrong. They had expected resistance. They had expected to dodge patrols, outmaneuver defense grids, and mask their presence from long-range sensors. What they had not expected was silence. There were no human patrols searching for them, no frantic military movements indicating that their presence had been detected, no warnings, no threats. But something was off. The longer they remained, the more uneasy they became. First, the stealth fleet's sensors picked up nothing unusual. Just the standard layout of an expanding interstellar civilization. Earth was a beacon of activity, with massive orbital stations housing tens of millions. Mars had been transformed into a terraformed jewel, complete with sprawling cities beneath its shimmering dome. The outer planets were home to massive shipyards that produced human vessels at an alarming rate. And yet, something was missing. Where were the warships? The Dominion had expected to find fleets upon fleets of human battleships patrolling their borders, escorting convoys, maintaining planetary security. And while there were military ships present, they were nothing like the monstrous vessel that had erased the Dominion's fleet. These were ordinary warships, powerful certainly, but conventional. They had visible weapons, standard shielding, and formations that the Dominion had seen before in other militaries. And yet, the humans had destroyed the Dominion's fleet with a single ship. It didn't make sense. The Dominion spies dug deeper. They tapped into human communication networks, analyzing secure transmissions and military orders. They infiltrated human colonies, disguised as traders and diplomats, embedding themselves within Earth's bustling information hubs. They combed through records, looking for any trace of the technology that had been used against them. And what they found terrified them. The humans did not have an invincible fleet of godlike warships hidden away. There was no secret superweapon, no ancient artifact granting them cosmic power. The ship that had annihilated the Dominion's fleet, it didn't exist in any public record. No one on Earth spoke of it. No orders had ever been issued to deploy such a vessel. No research logs indicated its construction. It was as if the ship had never existed. Except it had. The Dominion spies were trained to recognize patterns, and the lack of records was a pattern in itself. Someone had erased all traces of that ship's existence, and only one entity had the power to do that: the humans themselves. They went deeper. The more they searched, the more anomalies they found. Humanity's history was filled with war, with struggles, with technological leaps that seemed almost unnatural. Nations that had once been on the brink of annihilation had, time and time again, developed weapons far beyond their enemies, turning the tide in ways no one had predicted. Their advancement was not linear. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and devastating. Then came the most disturbing discovery. A message. Not an official transmission, not a public declaration, but something buried deep within the hidden layers of human communication networks. A single phrase that appeared over and over again, sometimes in classified military orders, sometimes in the records of long-dead governments, sometimes encoded in the very infrastructure of their digital systems. Project Revenant. The Dominions. Analysts didn't understand it at first. It had no context, no details. But the more they searched, the more they realized that every major leap in human warfare, every sudden advancement, every unexpected victory, was linked to it in some way. And then, without warning, their search ended. One by one, the Dominion's spies began to disappear. The first to go missing was an operative stationed on Mars. One moment, he was sending a secure transmission back to the stealth fleet, detailing strange inconsistencies in human military records. The next, his signal vanished, not jammed, not traced, gone, as if he had never existed. Then the analysts aboard the stealth fleet lost contact with an infiltration unit on Earth, then another on Europa. Within a single solar cycle, every operative embedded within human space went dark. The stealth fleet's commander panicked. Had they been compromised? Was this an elaborate trap? He ordered an immediate withdrawal, but before they could even begin their retreat, a voice spoke. Not over the fleet's communication channels, not through intercepted transmissions. The voice spoke directly into their minds. You misunderstand. Every crew member froze. The voice was human, and yet it was not. It carried weight beyond comprehension, as if the very stars had leaned in to whisper their final judgment. You are looking for something that cannot be found, because it is not a thing. The commander's blood ran cold. The shadows at the edges of space seemed to deepen, as if the void itself had turned its gaze upon them. Project Revenant is not a weapon. It is not a ship. It is not a technology you can steal. It is the reason you are still alive. The cloaking fields of the Dominion's fleet flickered. Something was interfering with them. You have made a mistake. A single, human warship appeared before them. Not the massive, godlike vessel that had wiped out their fleet. A small, unassuming frigate. Alone. The Dominion's commander knew better. They turned and fled. The moment they crossed the threshold of human space, they sent their final transmission back to the Grand Warlord. A single line. "We should not have come here." The Dominion had always believed that knowledge was power. But now, for the first time, they wished they had remained ignorant. Because whatever humanity was, whatever Project Revenant truly meant, it was something beyond war, beyond conquest, beyond the Dominion's ability to comprehend, and they had just made themselves known to it. The Dominion's Grand Warlord stood in the war chamber, staring at the transmission that had just arrived. The message was short, but the weight behind, it was unbearable. "We should not have come here." It was not a report, not a tactical analysis, not a request for reinforcements. It was a warning, one that came too late. For cycles upon cycles, the Dominion had ruled the stars through sheer dominance. Their fleets had burned civilizations to the ground, their armies had subjugated entire species, and their technology had ensured that no enemy could ever rise against them. They had studied the psychology of lesser beings, understood how fear could be used as a weapon, and crushed rebellions before they even had the chance to begin. And yet, for the first time, the Grand Warlord felt something he had never known before. A feeling that twisted his insides and sent his mind spiraling into depths he dared not explore. Was this fear? He replayed the message again, this time focusing on the metadata. The fleet's cloaking signatures had destabilized the moment they attempted to leave human space. Their systems had been tampered with, and yet there had been no physical intrusion. The artificial intelligences governing their security had no record of breaches. The Dominion's best infiltration countermeasures had detected nothing. And then there was the final transmission from the fleet commander. His words were not spoken in defiance, nor in anger. There was no arrogance in his tone, no strategic coldness, no military posturing, only resignation. The Grand Warlord had seen warriors die with honor, and he had seen cowards beg for mercy. But this was something different. This was the voice of someone who had gazed upon something beyond his understanding and realized, too late, that he was never meant to see it. The Dominion's High Council convened an emergency meeting. Every available analyst was ordered to review the findings. Every scientist, every strategist, every warlord, the greatest minds of the Dominion, all focused on deciphering the mystery of humanity's power. The data was troubling. No evidence of an advanced superweapon. No records of the warship that had erased their fleet. No indication of a centralized human military force capable of producing such a devastating level of destruction. And yet, it had happened. Theories emerged, some more outlandish than others. Some claimed that humanity had unlocked a level of technology so advanced that it existed outside of conventional understanding. Others suggested that humanity had ascended beyond the physical realm, that they no longer relied on ships or fleets, but had instead become something else entirely, something that could manipulate reality itself. One theory, however, was met with silence, a simple, horrifying possibility. What if the ship that destroyed the Dominion's fleet was never meant to be seen? What if humanity had not intentionally revealed its power? What if the warship had been a mistake, an unintended glimpse into something far more terrifying? This possibility shook the High Council to its core, because it meant that humanity had not been warning them. It meant that humanity had not needed to send a message. It meant that they had seen only a fraction of what humanity was truly capable of. But then, something even worse happened. A new transmission arrived. Unlike the desperate warning from their reconnaissance fleet, this one was different. It was from humanity. A simple message. No threats. No demands. Only 3 words. Do not return. It was not a plea. It was not a challenge. It was an instruction. For a civilization like the Dominion, one that had spent centuries ruling through fear and power, this was an impossible reality to accept. They had encountered resistance before. They had fought brutal wars, exterminated entire species, and crushed rebellions with ease, but never, not once, had they been given an ultimatum. The Grand Warlord read the message over and over again, searching for hidden meanings, for unspoken threats. But there were none. Humanity had not declared war. They had not demanded tribute. They had not even called for peace negotiations. They had simply told the Dominion what to do. And the worst part? The Dominion was actually considering obeying. The High Council was divided. Some called for an immediate retaliation, demanding that the full force of the Dominion be unleashed upon humanity. They argued that no civilization, no matter how powerful, could withstand the sheer might of the Dominion's war machine, but others hesitated. They spoke of the unknown, of the warship that should not exist, of the spies who had vanished without a trace, of Project Revenant, a term that now haunted their very thoughts. And then, something happened that silenced the debate entirely. Single Dominion dreadnought, stationed at the edge of Dominion space, suddenly lost all contact. No distress signal, no battle alerts, no sign of an enemy fleet. One moment, the warship was there. The next, it was gone. Then another vanished. And another. Entire sectors of Dominion-controlled space went silent, with no trace of battle, no sign of struggle. Planets that had once been thriving with Dominion infrastructure suddenly registered as barren wastelands, untouched, as if no civilization had ever existed there. The High Council panicked. They ordered every available warship to be placed on high alert, prepared for a full-scale invasion. But no enemy came, no fleets arrived, no armadas descended upon them, only silence. And then, for the first time in Dominion history, the High Council ordered a full retreat. The Dominion abandoned its expansion efforts, withdrawing from the frontier and sealing off its borders. Entire colonies were left behind, their populations sacrificed in an effort to distance themselves from the unknown force that was erasing their existence. The Grand Warlord issued one final order, one that had never before been given in all of Dominion history. No ship was to approach human space. No scout, no diplomat, no war vessel. The Sol system was to be marked as forbidden, a no-go zone for all Dominion forces. And for the first time in millennia, the Dominion knew what it meant to be afraid. Because in all their years of conquest, in all their displays of strength and dominance, they had never once encountered a civilization that did not see them as a threat. Humanity did not fear them. Humanity did not acknowledge them as equals. Humanity simply told them to leave. And when they hesitated, humanity erased them from existence. Without a single word, without a declaration of war, without even acknowledging their actions. It was not power that the Dominion feared. It was the sheer indifference with which humanity had demonstrated it. Because only now did they understand. Humanity did not wage war. Humanity ended it. The Grand Warlord sat alone in his war chamber, staring at the void beyond the observation deck. Stars glittered in the abyss, their cold light illuminating a universe that had suddenly become far too vast, far too unknown. For the first time in Dominion history, they had fled. The Supreme Chancellor of the High Council had issued the final decree. The frontier worlds were to be abandoned. Colonies, some of which had stood for centuries, were left to their fate. The Dominion had collapsed inward, pulling its fleets back to its core systems, severing contact with the outer regions. Entire sectors of Dominion space had gone dark, wiped from the star charts. No distress calls, no remains, no signs of battle, just silence. And the most terrifying part? There was no evidence that humanity had even lifted a finger. The fleets that had disappeared, gone, without a trace. No wreckage, no residual energy readings, nothing. The warships stationed at the edge of Dominion space, one by one, they simply stopped responding. No alarms, no warning signs, no enemy signals detected. The Dominion's greatest minds had spent entire cycles analyzing the data, scanning for clues, searching for anything that could explain what had happened. But there was nothing. Not a single fragment of debris. Not a single engine signature. Not even a gravitational disturbance that might suggest cloaked vessels. The most advanced sensor arrays in the Dominion, devices capable of detecting the faintest anomalies across interstellar distances, had found absolutely nothing. It was as if those ships had never existed at all. And so, the Dominion did what no one had ever thought possible. They surrendered. Not in the traditional sense. No negotiations were made. No treaties were signed. No terms were given. They simply stopped. The High Council declared an end to all military campaigns. The expansion fleets were recalled. Military conscription was suspended indefinitely. Even the great armadas, the pride of the Dominion, were no longer being constructed. A civilization that had known nothing but conquest had chosen, instead, to vanish into its own borders. And all because of a single warship. The Grand Warlord clenched his fists. Was this truly the fate of the Dominion? To cower behind its borders, reduced to nothing more than a shadow of its former self? There had to be an answer. Humanity could not be omnipotent. There had to be a limit to their power. Somewhere, there had to be a weakness. And yet, the more the Grand Warlord searched, the more he began to realize the truth. This was never about power. The Dominion had encountered powerful enemies before. They had fought great wars, decimated civilizations, crushed empires beneath their might. But humanity was different. Humanity did not conquer. Humanity did not threaten. Humanity simply existed. And yet that simple existence had become the greatest terror the Dominion had ever known. The reports were still being analyzed, but one detail remained consistent. One terrifying, impossible, unexplainable detail. No one had ever seen the warship. Not in full. Not in any meaningful way. The first reconnaissance fleet had detected an anomaly, an impossibility of physics. Something that should not exist, and then they were gone. The second wave of scouts had been wiped from reality before they even had the chance to see what had destroyed the first fleet, and the warships at the Dominion's borders vanished, one by one, with no indication of an approaching force. Even the deep space probes, unmanned, unarmed, invisible to all known forms of detection, had disappeared before transmitting anything of value. No footage, no images, no sensor readings, nothing. And that was the problem. Humanity had never revealed their strength. They had not flexed their military might. They had not launched a grand invasion. They had simply let the Dominion take a single step too far. And in response, they had erased them, not out of malice, not out of vengeance, but because the Dominion had become inconvenient. And the moment that realization sank in, the High Council made their final, unthinkable decision. They erased humanity from their records. Every Dominion archive was purged. Every map was redrawn. Every scholar, every scientist, every historian was ordered to forget. The Sol system was no longer acknowledged. The name humanity was removed from all official documentation. No future Dominion ship would be allowed to approach the Forbidden Zone. No expedition would be sanctioned. No questions would be asked. The official stance of the Dominion, humanity, had never existed. It was a desperate attempt to forget, to pretend they had never encountered the impossible. Because if they acknowledged it, if they allowed themselves to think about it for even a moment, then they would have to face the truth. That the Dominion, the great and mighty Dominion, had been spared, not because of diplomacy, not because of negotiations, but because humanity simply did not see them as a threat. And if, one day, humanity changed its mind, there would be nothing left of the Dominion to remember. The Grand Warlord stood, staring into the endless void, knowing that, somewhere out there, beyond the black, humanity was watching, and that, more than anything, was the greatest fear of all.